You are listening to the It's Your Time podcast, and I'm your host, Certified Life Coach Michelle Arnold Burke. In today's episode, I'm sharing a recent conversation with Eliza Core where we discussed empowering women for medical device sales. Welcome to the It's Your Time podcast, the podcast where busy professionals like you get the practical solutions and support you need to gain control of your schedule so you can strive to be the best in your career, but without the stress and overwhelm. If you're looking to increase your energy and decrease your stress, you are in the right place. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the podcast, friends. I have a treat for you. It has been a minute since we've had a guest on, and I love sharing new folks with you. So today, I am sharing a recent conversation with Eliza Core. Now, Eliza is a colleague at Medtronic. She is a district manager for the cardiac rhythm management in the Western New England area, and she has been with the company for 24 years. So to say the least, she knows a thing or two about what we're discussing today. She is going to go ahead and introduce her full self in the conversation, but I wanted to give you some background because we do work in different divisions within the company and we share a passion to help elevate women in sales. We were talking one day just offline and thought this is a really important topic and we wanted to share it here with you, how to get more women in the field of sales. Now, obviously our conversation is specific to medical device sales, but I think this applies to so many women in a variety of sales positions. There are too many amazing women who don't think they can do sales. And honestly, I think there are so many companies missing out on what these amazing women have to offer. And in today's episode, we're talking about some of our experiences, tips that we think are important to share with you, and why we want you to start believing more in yourself when it comes to being able to sell. We need more of you. All of you are different, and that is exactly what works. Before we get into it, I do want to say a common theme that seemed to come up was around confidence or lack thereof. And I still have the Boost Your Confidence program open. You can find out all of the info if you go to michelleburkecoaching.com/confidence. And I have a bonus. I am going to be adding 6 breath works to the program at no extra cost. So if you sign up now, for the $47 program, you will receive the breathworks once they are added. Again, michelleburkecoaching.com/confidence to get all of the details. You will find the weekly topics there, the layout, all the 411. Okay, without further ado, please enjoy the conversation. Okay, I am so excited to have you here today. So before we jump in, can you please introduce yourself, maybe share a little bit about anything that's important to you, all of the goodness, and how you would like to be introduced?
Sure. No, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here too. So, I'll start with my professional self. So currently I'm the district manager, which means I manage a sales team for Medtronic, and specifically that's in cardiac rhythm management. And I do that right outside of Boston. So we call it our Central New England territory. A little bit about my personal life. I am a wife and I have 2 boys. So my youngest son just turned 10 and my oldest is 11. And then just a little bit about things that I love to do. I'm an avid distance runner. So I try to do at least a marathon a year,
Wow.
which brings me a lot of joy. And then just to kind of talk a little bit about, what I'm like as a person, I feel like my passion is really just making a difference in the lives of others. And that I think comes into play in all the things like I previously mentioned. Like that's one of the reasons I love working for Medtronic. That's one of the reasons I'm in medical device sales. I try to bring that to my family. And then even in my running too, it's something that I love to share about and to share with others too. So
Yeah, that is great. And I would say you definitely make a difference in cardiac rhythm, saving lives, not just not just touching them, right?
absolutely.
Holy smokes. And I know another important topic for both of us, and that's why we're here today, is to really discuss getting more women into this industry. In fact, we are both so passionate about it that we volunteer for an employee resource group where we help to accelerate women in the field. So I guess I would like to just start by having a conversation where really when we do this, it's kind of like everybody's eavesdropping. So like let's start with your why. Why is this important to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I would say first, and I think I kind of mentioned this before, like I just love the work that I do. It brings me joy. Like I enjoy going to work every day. And so I feel like, as I mentioned too, like I think it's just important. Like I want to help other people. And so I think I just want other people and I want other women to be introduced to this field because it is such a great and rewarding field to be part of.
I agree. I feel like there are so many women that miss out on opportunities. And in turn, like the companies like Medtronic miss out on having these women in their companies because oftentimes there's this thought, and I always kind of joke like, nobody really grows up. I mean, there might be a handful of people, but you don't necessarily grow up to say, like, "Oh, I want to be a salesperson when I grow up, right? It just kind of like ends up getting here. But I think for a lot of women, there's also this idea around selling. I remember when I first told my friend that I was getting into my first sales position, she's like, "Oh, you're going to be a maggot." And I was like, "Hey, that doesn't sound like very nice, right?" But there is this idea around sleaze. And so I think when people, especially women, are looking at it, they stay away maybe because of the connotations that are associated with it. What are your thoughts on how this shows up?
Yeah, no, and I'm so glad that you asked that question because I totally thought the same thing. Like before I ended up going into sales, I feel like, that, yeah, I don't want to be looked at as like, a pestering type of person. I have, not like immediate family, but I have other family members that are in sales and even them like questioning me like, oh, you want to go into sales, like why do you want to do that? And so I do think that there's kind of that stigma. But I also think that in being in sales you don't have to be someone that you're not, right? And I think that was like the biggest thing that I learned is that what makes me successful as a salesperson and what makes other people successful as a salesperson is bringing your own perspective to that and being your true self. Like what a conversation you may have with a customer could be totally different than a conversation that I would have just based on like how we approach things. And I think our customers can also see through that. Like if I were to try to be someone that I'm not, I don't think that I would necessarily get the sale. Like, right? Our customers want, and people in general want to buy from people that they trust, right? And I don't think that you're going to gain that trust if you're not true to yourself.
I think that is so important. I think that's a great point. I know when I first started, and I don't know if this goes back to kind of like growing up and societal beliefs about like what you're supposed to be as like, a good girl and nice and care and be humble and seen, not heard. So I think I definitely agree. I had some of those thoughts also. Like, I don't want people to think I'm pushy. And I had to really reframe that and be like, no, actually, I think selling is more like serving. Like, my thoughts about selling is that I can care about these people and patients and family members. And to your point about being yourself, there was one of my early DMs. He took me aside and he was like, "Shell, you need to show your accounts more of who you really are," because I felt like I had to be very put together and very corporate. And I thought, oh my God, if they really know who I am, then we're in trouble. But right now, here we are 17 years later. So there's a little something to, being authentic.
Yeah. And I think at the same time, like, I think that's super important to be authentic, but I think what it's also important to address that you can still be authentic, but you can push yourself beyond what your comfort level is. And that's something that I really learned as well is that like, I'm not the typical person who could go up to somebody and ask for something that's going to benefit me, right? Like that can be really challenging for us. And I think that can be really challenging for us as women. But I've learned that, you know what, like, because I have these authentic relationships with my customer, it's okay for me to go to them at the end of the quarter and say, hey, like, you know what? I need some help. Like, can you help me out? Do you mind if you have a patient coming up and you think a Medtronic device would be appropriate? Like, I could use that help. And it's not like it's asking for a favor, but it's not something that you have to do all the time. But for me, like for some people, that's like a conversation they may have every day, and that's fine. And that works. But for me, like that was something that was uncomfortable. So I think there's this part of being true to yourself, but also being able to push yourself outside of your comfort zone that can make you successful in sales too.
Yeah, I think I like to think of it as like you're stretching but not snapping, right? Like you don't want to make it so much, but you do want to put yourself, and that's where the growth opportunities are really and getting through that discomfort, I think is when you get to the other side. And that's when you're like, wow, I actually did have that in me.
No, absolutely.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about some of the mentors that have helped you along the way? Because I do think like that is so important. And I think especially within our employee resource group, like it has been game changing as far as how I look at my career, networking. And also, I'll just quickly say, I feel like that has also changed. Like when I first thought about networking, I also thought that was kind of like, ooh, it's like I'm kind of being sleazy. And I don't know, like I'm asking these people for help, but I'm like, wait a second. No, I might be able to help them too, right? Like I talk to mentees now that I'm like, networking is really just getting to know people, and they might not help you, but the 7 people behind them might, or you might help them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know. So I feel like I've been really lucky to have several mentors throughout my career. And so I've had both formal mentors that have been set up through Medtronic programs, but then of course informal too. And I guess I'll first start by saying like my first mentor truly was my mother. And so my mom was a professor and she worked in leadership, and she did actually executive coaching. So she's, a really focused on like women being successful in their careers. And so it was just always great. Like she always just kind of made me feel like, no, you can do this, like don't hold back. And so it was just really nice to have like that personal mentor in my life as well. Then I've had, as I mentioned, I've had, mentors within Medtronic, like some even set up through specific programs. And a lot of them have been men, which I think, has been super helpful to get different perspectives there as well. And I think, we always talk about like the difference between like mentors and sponsors. And so I've had both, and some of those, again, were more like set up through Medtronic and others weren't, but I found like a lot of the mentors that I had became my sponsors as well. So I think that's really helped me within my, be successful at Medtronic, as well as having, some of these men that were in like leadership positions that were then able to really stand up for me when I was going for new roles.
I was going to say before we go too far, can you maybe
Yeah.
just explain the difference between mentor and sponsor for people who might not be totally
Yes.
familiar?
Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm sure it's like kind of different, maybe depending on like where you're at, but at Medtronic, and the way that I think about it, like a mentor is kind of, a person that you can go to and just ask for advice, and they give you direction and ideas. Whereas a sponsor is someone who's really, when there's a position available, or even if there's not a position available, they're the person who's going to stand up for you and say, this person is right for this job, and this is why you should hire her. And I think, especially for women, it's really important to have both mentors and sponsors, probably sponsors even more so. You can't really just get a spot. You can't just really go up to somebody and ask them to be a sponsor. Like you kind of have to develop that relationship. But I definitely think if you can develop that relationship with leaders within, a company, or even if you're looking to get into a company, to kind of try to get those people that get to know you and see the work that you've done.
Yeah,
I think
it's not like
it's
not like your marathons where you sponsor, like I'll pay $200 and get a sign.
Right. No, not like that. Yeah. And I think we were talking earlier, we're both part of the employee resource group, the women's group at Medtronic. And I think that really does open up a lot of doors to be able to network with different leaders within the company, and then also have them become a sponsor, because they can see, you might not have opportunities to do the work, that you need to be able to show someone you're able to do a new job. But in like an employee resource group, a lot of times you can, take on different responsibilities and be able to, to show that to people. So
yeah, I think that's important. And, I was just having a conversation with someone who is actually interviewing, and a lot of this, we're kind of talking about recruitment and getting more females into the industry. So she was talking about going between 2 different companies, and one was Medtronic. And of course I'm like, well, take this as, I'm biased, right? But I think to the point of the employee resource group, it's an important conversation to have during interviews, like to find out from companies, what kind of support is there for females?
Absolutely. No, and I think it's so important. And I think you've got to look to see like what is the right cultural fit for you. And a lot of times, I mean, and employee resource groups are different. There's the women's groups, but we also have like Asian descent, African, and so I think in general, just being able to find a place where you culturally fit in is just so important.
Yes, I feel like nowadays, especially like community connection, like it's so important that it's somewhere, yeah, that you feel like you belong.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, you are a district manager, like you mentioned, so you have the opportunity to like bring these people in, do the interviews. And I'm curious, and I always am very deliberate with how I want to say this because if there are men listening, this is not anything, against men, but I feel like there are probably differences in men and women as they show up for interviews. I guess, can you maybe speak to that? And are there any like 2 to 3 tips you might give to females who are going into an interview process for this industry?
Yeah, so I'll first start with like kind of the differences. And I think like unfortunately, one of the things that I still see, and I would even say is somewhat true of myself at times, is just this gap in confidence. And whether that's like truly that men have more confidence than women, or it's just they do a better job of portraying, even if they don't have the confidence. But I mean, even myself, like I definitely have a lot of confidence in the work that I do, but I do find myself kind of replaying, scenarios like conversations I had throughout the day. And I'm asking myself, like, did I say the right thing? Should have said this? And so I think that's definitely something that shows up. And I've noticed as well when I interview people. And I think we can talk also about, we know that a woman might not necessarily apply for a job that she doesn't feel qualified for. I mean, there's been research, right, that shows that, and that a man would. And so I even sometimes see that as I'm looking through, just because the first process obviously is like the resumes coming in. And sometimes even just like looking through that, I can even kind of see that difference, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, I think even when I talk to mentees that are just considering putting in applications, a lot of it does come down to the confidence. And when I'm talking to women, I feel like they're looking to those people that they're trying to network with in order to feel more confident. And I'm like, no, 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 that is something that you have to bring within yourself. And it goes to your point about this whole self-talk, right? Like when we ask ourselves, oh, did I do that wrong? Should I not have said that? Like we need to also answer our brain. I always am telling people like, yeah, you got to tell yourself like where you did do a good job, right? Because our brain will go crazy and tell us all of the terrible things that we've done. Like we need to reel it in and show ourselves where we did okay.
Yeah. And I think too, and again, like this is a generalization, but I think like as women, I'm a working mom as well. And I feel like because I'm a working mom, like I have to prove myself even further. Like I have to show like, this is why you should hire me, more so. Like obviously anybody wants to show that, but like I just feel like you have to kind of take it to the next step, or we feel that we have to take it to the next step.
Yeah.
And I don't
Oh my
know
gosh.
that necessarily comes across all the time with men either. So I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, no, no, no. I think that's a great point. No, so here is the crazy thing. My head is like, oh my gosh, because I do not have kids. And I feel like I usually have to prove myself more so because I should have the extra time to do the extra
Ah,
things because I don't have the kids. Like that's so fascinating. And I remember when I started, this was so long ago. This would probably, well, who knows, it may or may not happen now. But I remember the rep that I worked with, he was like, this is not a good mom job. And I believed him for a bit because I thought the hours are crazy. You never really know. But I'm like, no, no, no. It is a fine mom job. Like you figure out your support system, right?
yeah, and I think so too. And I think that is a reason why probably women are fearful to get into this. And going back to your question at the beginning as to like, why do we need to have this conversation? Like, this is exactly why, because I think women are holding themselves back. I see it like in the cardiac rhythm management sales world, there are still very few female sales representatives. We have our clinical specialist split so the clinical specialist team, they're kind of more on the clinical side of following the device and the salespeople are doing that as well, but really driving the sales more. So we find with our clinical teams, it's probably about 50-50, but with the sales reps, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's just not as many as I think it could be. And I think part of that is because people don't think that they could do it. But I did it when my kids were very young, and it was, yes, it's challenging, but I loved it so much. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, it made me a better mom. Like, if I am doing something that I love and I'm passionate about, then I can be the person that I want to be both at my job and at home. So
I think that is so important. And I think when you just said, we need to talk about this more, actually, another thought came to my mind. And I agree. I think I am the only female in our district that's a sales rep. We have female clinical specialists, but from a rep standpoint in our district, I'm the only female. But I think the other area of conversation, and this could be an entirely other podcast, is that we don't talk a lot about money. And I think there's definitely differences in like pay, promotional opportunities. Back to your point about like throwing your hat in the ring for the job. I think then women are also, once they get the job, not as quick to speak up and talk about how great they have been doing because they think your manager should just know it. And then you might miss out on a promotion. And I've been there, and I now tell people all the time, you have to like record the things you're doing. You might not remember, and your boss for sure will not remember. There are how many other people that you, as a DM, right, are in charge of, that you need to have those conversations.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's also sort of that fear as like, if I speak up as a woman, like how am I then portrayed? And so that can limit people probably from.
I think that's where I'm going to insert the Taylor Swift, "The Man" song.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. All right, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I did want to talk about like the three,
yes,
you said two are like three pieces of what advice I would give for someone getting into the job. And so I would say, because I've been interviewing a lot of people too, and I always ask the question, like, what motivates you? And I just think that it's so important to really know like what your passion is. And so like I talked about that, mine at the beginning is like, I really just enjoy helping other people. And that's kind of like why I feel like I fit into the medical device sales. And that's why I fit into Medtronic. We talk about our mission all the time, right? Like, you ask any Medtronic employee and they can tell you, restore life, alleviate pain, and extend life, right? Or restore health, sorry. So I think, everybody knows that. And so when I'm interviewing people, that doesn't have to be your passion. Like, your passion could be something else, but just knowing what your passion is and knowing what your why is, I think is super important. The other piece of advice I would give is that, I think it specifically, I'll talk to cardiac rhythm management because that's where I've spent most of my career at Medtronic. And it's just very important to have some sort of medical experience in our division. And I wouldn't say this is true, and you can probably speak to your division as well, of all divisions of a Medtronic, but within our division, like, it would be very difficult to get a role without having any sort of like medical, and whether that's like, you were trained as an EMT, or you went and got your medical assistant license, or there's different ways to get that, but that's definitely something that I would recommend to people, even if you have the sales experience. And then the last thing I would say too, is that I think sometimes we need to take a step back or make a lateral move in order to make a move forward. So if you're already in a sales role and you want to get into sales, then, maybe a clinical role at Medtronic is a good place to start to get that experience. So I think just being open to taking a lateral move or taking a step back is just important in order to get introduced into the medical device world. So.
Yeah, I love that, knowing your why. I feel like that's so important, even not just to know from a DM standpoint, but from that person that you're interviewing, because that's what guides all of your decisions, right? That's the filter by which you are kind of making your decisions in life. And I feel like that as a DM probably gives you some insight. And I think a lot of times, I know for me, like, the hardest question one of my coaches asked me was like, "Michelle, what do you want?" And I was like, "Oh, wait, what do I want? Hold on a second." And I had to really look at that. Like, why am I doing this? What do I want? Am I doing it for the people pleasing because I think they're going to like me, right? Like, really getting clear on what that is.
Yeah. And I think it's something that you have to revisit, and it's okay if it changes too. But I mean, we all have hard days, right? We all work really hard, and there are times when I have to revisit my why because I'm like, this is so
Why?
crazy. But having that really does, like, I think it just grounds you. And once you get into the industry as well.
Yes. And to your other point about the having the some sort of medical experience, I feel like you're probably right. It probably depends on what division, because I know there are some, or companies. I feel like I also tell mentees,
Right.
people just getting started, that you might be able to get into another company to get started. To your point, maybe it's a step, not, a smaller company, not Medtronic, but being open, I think, is very, very important. And I also think, like, being willing to be flexible and change and know that that is like the one constant.
That's so true. Yeah, because I was, in an interview that I was just doing, and they asked us like what a day looks like. And we were like, what a day looks like is that your plan in the morning is never, it never happens throughout the day. Like, it's always different. So as long as you know when you wake up in the morning that your day is going to be different than what you originally thought it was going to be, then you'll be good.
I'm dying, because that's what I try to tell people whenever they're like, an average, it's a normal day. I'm like, there is no such thing. And I had this one person who was like, I am very structured and I like to know my time and my schedule. And I was like, you will not like this job.
No, nope.
It will drive you crazy. Okay. Have we missed anything?
I don't, I feel like we've kind of touched on most the important things. Like, there's nothing else that I can really think of. I think just kind of most importantly, like, put yourself out there, take a risk, like, and have that confidence in yourself that you can do this.
Yes. And like, have your own back. And you know what? I'll also add, because I just had this conversation yesterday with the person who's interviewing, and she was worried about making the wrong decision and the right decision. Like, should she be a CS? Should she be a rep? And I was like, trust your gut and then have your own back. Like, if it doesn't work out, to your earlier point, don't beat yourself up about it, right? That's all optional. You learn from it, and then you take that information and you move on to the next.
Absolutely. And it makes us stronger in the long run, right?
Yes. Oh, I love that. That's probably a good place to stop. Thank you so much. Okay, where can people find you?
So I am, let's see.
Especially if you're hiring.
What's that?
Especially if you're hiring.
If I'm hiring, I think probably I would say the best place is to find me on LinkedIn. So it's just under Eliza Core on my profile. That's like, from a professional standpoint, I think that's the best place to find me. I do have an Instagram profile as well, but that's mostly based on my family and running. So you can certainly find me there. But in terms of my professional side of things, I would say LinkedIn is the place to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay, wasn't she great? It's so funny how we all have that internal chatter, right? She has worked for the world's largest medical device company, successfully worked for the world's largest medical device company for almost 24 years, almost a quarter of a century, friends. And I'm sure she'll appreciate it when we look at it that way, right? And she still questions herself. So let's normalize it and also know it's optional for all of us. When we have those questions, should I have not said that? Did I mess that up? Whatever it is in your brain, you need to answer it and remind yourself what you did well. It's normal for your brain to go to the negative. Building your confidence is you having your own back and talking to yourself in a way that you would speak to maybe a friend or a mentee. It's helping to encourage you to keep going. Okay. We would love to hear from you. You can find Eliza Core on LinkedIn. And of course, I'm over there, as well as at Michelle Burke Coaching on Instagram. Okay, friends, that's what I have for you today. Let's meet back next week. But for now, make it a great day. Take care. Did you know you can take this work to a deeper level with me one-on-one? Go to michelleburkecoaching.com and click on Get Started to begin.